Once you have cloned your Simplyblock deployer repository for AWS, you need to perform a few steps to get it ready. First, you need to install Terraform, and next, you need to install the AWS command line interface and configure it on the host from which you want to bootstrap your deployments. Then it is required to create a few AWS objects which are accessible by your AWS command line interface within your account. This includes an S3 bucket and key, as well as a DynamoDB table. Set the object names as environment variables and assign them when you initialize the Terraform engine. Then you need to switch your Terraform workplace or create it if you do this for the first time. For example, you may use your name as the workspace name, such as Michael. The Terraform deployment covers instances, security groups, VPN, and application gateway. Once your Terraform environment is prepared and initialized, run Terraform plan to show the execution plan. Then you are ready to deploy your AWS infrastructure. You may specify variables on the Terraform apply command directly or edit them in the variables TF file. Most commonly, you may want to specify the number of nodes in the control plane and the number of storage nodes used. For the control plane, use either 1 or 3. You may also specify the instance type for each node type, including control plane, storage nodes, and extra nodes, which are used to deploy extra Simplyblock caching nodes. You may additionally want to enable EKS, another availability zone, and the hardware architecture for storage nodes, which can be ARM64 or x64. For the control plane, only x64 is supported. If you want to use EBS volumes instead of local instance storage, specify the amount of EBS volumes to deploy per storage node. This is currently limited to up to 6 volumes per node, but if needed, you may change this limit. You also need to specify the volume sizes in this case. Specify the size of the MD journal volume, 1 per node. Typically, 2% of the capacity of the total amount of data volumes per node is enough. This is the storage node's EBS size. 1. The size of each data volume is specified in the Terraform node's EBS size 2. It is identical for all volumes. Set the HugePages size per instance. This is the amount of HugePage memory reserved per instance. You may allocate at least half of the instance memory for HugePages. One HugePage is 2 megabytes in size. A secondary storage node is required for a HA setup. It provides a failover capability by processing I/O of primary nodes in case of failure. The secondary storage node does not require any disks attached. Terraform apply provides all output of provisioned instances and other objects in the output's JSON file. Of particular importance are the IP addresses of the control plane nodes and URLs for management services. Once the infrastructure is deployed, you can run the Bootstrap cluster script, which prepares the instances by installing the Simplyblock, KLEE, and Prerequisites, and then deploys the control plane and storage node container stacks on top using the Simplyblock deployment API. It accepts a long list of parameters which are then applied when creating the first cluster and adding different storage nodes. This includes warning and critical thresholds for cluster capacity utilization over provisioning in %, the maximum total size limit of available storage per node, the erasure coding schema, which is based on the data chunks n specified in the NDCS parameter and parity chunks k specified in the NPCS parameter. The retention period for I/O statistics called metrics and the retention period for log files in Elastic. If storage nodes are to be deployed into Kubernetes using the Helm chart, use the K8 node flag to avoid adding storage nodes as the disaggregated cluster. To connect to the control plane from Kubernetes workers or from any other management layer, use the following parameters, which are output by the bootstrapping script: the API endpoint, the cluster UID, the cluster secret. Also output are endpoints for other control plane services, such as Grafana and Graylog, and the private key to SSH into the control plane instances and storage nodes. For convenience reasons, the entire SSH command is printed as well, using Bastion server to reach the instances. The public Simplyblock Postman collection can be used to interact with the control plane using the API. First, you need to enter the API endpoint, the cluster UUID, and the secret on top level. For example, list all of the storage nodes, which are a part of the cluster. Finally, from a shell on the management node, you may use the command line interface, for example, to list the storage nodes and the cluster.